Today we're looking at some Test of Honor, which is currently released by a company called Grogtalk. Some time ago this game was released by Warlord Games, and as just one of the many products in their stable. This was the book. The current iteration, which includes all the original rules, plus a few of the frequently asked questions, updates and so on. That's what it looks like at the moment. Today we're going to have a talk through Test of Honor. We're going to have a look at the first scenario, and we'll have a look at how the gameplay works its way out. Okay, stay tuned. Under Warlord Games, it was written by Graham Davey, developed by Graham Davey and Andy Hobday, and a few other people who are obviously involved, as they always are, playtesters and so on. But currently, in the grey for now, Graham Davey has branched on his own, and this is one of his core products that he has on his suite. Now, what we are hoping to do is just have a quick run through on the game. We might talk a little bit about its history and ways to play, and go through how we have the first scenario, which is quite a good way to introduce new players, as well as seeing how it works. The rulebook, which is a little bit thicker than the original rulebook, also includes many of the updates that came afterward. As they released models, they released rules for those models and so on. So basically this is a compilation of all the rules. If you've got the original set, there's almost zero difference between this and the that one in the most modern version of the game, which is also interesting, because quite often once you've deviated from the source, often there's updates and versions 2s and 3s, and they can sometimes hardly look like they're the same game. There is an expansion which allows you to bring it into a more historical context, and that's one of the elements that this game has. So we'll have a quick look at what's in here as well, and it's just got a few expansion ideas and ways to make it all happen. So Test of Honor is first and foremost a skirmish game. You have a limited number of units on the board which represent a small force, bodyguard force, token force, and it's played on a 3x3 area, so it's very compact. And we have various units. Whilst all the units are very similar, when you're composing your force, you can obviously choose various factions and some few interesting options to upgrade your guys. So they come muskets, bowmen, spearmen. You got your Ashiguru class and your samurai. So basically you've got your forces that you define, and much like every other variant of these games, you have cards to represent the forces that you select. And on this we have our stats for every single unit, and we'll run through what they all mean as we go through a bit of a game. See, from a samurai point of view, numbers are higher. There are sometimes benefits for when you have them as a group, and there are reasons why you might have just a lone bowman or musketman on their own. To be blunt, this is very much not a game that you would play with hundreds of units. This is only a game that you would play at that small scale on the small elements. It's good because it's a little bit more cinematic, and you can definitely peel out different scenarios from your favorite movies and play them on there, whether it's escorting a prisoner, capturing a spy, whether you're following the exploits of a single lone samurai hero and you want to link a few adventures together and build experience and so on. So the ways that this game can be played, you can do it historically, where you just line up with your historic, get deep into the history and with the color schemes, etc. Make up your own, which is always fun. Play it as a pure points match, where it's just a matter of putting together the most points competitive units on the board. And campaign, you can put a battle sequence together in order for your samurai hero to gain experience and to also gain injuries where they linger and so on. So you're able to watch your samurai grow and your forces improve along the way. So the game is based around tokens. Tokens that get pulled out for actions, tokens that get applied for effects. And every unit has an action token, and they have a number of action tokens that are put aside for each of the individual units. The samurai has 3, and the Ashigaru generally have 1. Sometimes it may have more than 1, and sometimes the card itself will show you what the symbol is for and what type of token to pull out. We have these tokens, which are very special. You always have to have 3 of those, and these are fate tokens, and we'll again go through some of that. Blood spots for when you get wounded but don't die, and we have double-sided tokens for reloading muskets and moving cautiously, that you put next to the unit to be able to say that they can still perform some limited actions should they need to. You can of course run this at any scale, but the 28 mils is the scale that's the primary identifier, and everything that's in ranges is based on the 28 mil model. So simple enough to get your hands on any of these models. You don't have to go through one particular supplier or vendor, but obviously it's nice if you can support the people who make the game and promote it. Some units come in a block, such as the Ashigaru units, where you can put them down as units and bundles of 3, and these bases are also what comes with the sets as well. And these, as they take wounds, they get removed, and as they reduce in number, their effect also is reduced. As a group, they may be effective, they lose 1, they lose a second, and then finally they get the base gets removed altogether. You can also purchase them individually, but then they're on their own. And there are reasons why you might have a lone marksman or bowman separately. They could represent sergeants, they could represent special elites with their specific skills, or they might just be units just literally on their own. The samurai leader, you must always have a samurai leader, and that's always one of those characters that you need to have, and there are various options on how you want your samurai to be configured. This is a game that says what you see is what you get as much as possible. So basically, if you're going to have them unarmored, you have unarmored samurai. If you're going to have them armored, then put them in armor. If they're going to have a Naginata, then the model needs to show that. Apart from that, the restrictions are open-ended, but you're able to do what you need to do as long as you can model it. Sometimes certain units, even though they might be quote-unquote samurai or ronin, then they will also be considered these sorts of followers rather than their own characters, and may exist on a base as well. In which case, again, they'll have special rules that allow all that to happen. Like all tabletop games, there are dice involved, and they have their standard they're six-sided dice, but they have symbols rather than the numbers. 1 sword, 2 sword, a cross, or a no result. A success is considered having 3 swords. A superior advantage is when there are 5 swords. If the crosses outnumber the swords, then it's a negative. And of course, blanks are blanks. A success is usually measured by a 3 sword showing. So if you've got 3 swords showing, that's a success. If possible, something like that is a fumble. And where are we? I don't know, you're on here somewhere. There. And 5 swords is a super success. Some sort of benefit occurs. It can be that you get to do further damage, more of a strike, you get to counterattack, and so on. And more crosses is a fumble or some critical error, tripping, slipping, and so on. Taking a wound, etc. Basically, 3 swords is always a success, and don't get it as many, and avoid as many crosses as possible. So when you attack someone, roll the dice, looking for 3 swords, which you get. The person gets to avoid or dodge, and they also need 3 swords for that to happen, which doesn't happen in this instance. And then it's a strike for the damage, depending on what the weapon and is being used. There are effects for when you strike out and don't do damage. That's when blood spots occur. And again, once we run through a bit of a combat scenario, we'll show you what happens when that happens and some of the other effects along the way. The current Test of Honor rulebook is very easily laid out, and everything is displayed with lots of examples, pictures, images on what it looks like, and explains a great many topics, successes, failures, etc., what to do, setting out, and so on. So this is a complete system in itself. Once you have the basic set, besides a few of the obvious extras and a few other things, but you're looking at a game that you could continually play over and over again. As your understanding of the game improves, you can add a little bit of an additional layer of complexity, and you can change it up by doing a few more funkier effects, like moving on with experience and taking on quests and so on. So there are plenty of ways to expand the game once you start to play it. The basic game itself is very easy. There isn't a lot to it. It just gets tricky once you start to apply on a battlefield. It's funny how that works. everything looks easy in the rule book until it actually hits the till the dice start rolling, and that's when we really, it tests our strength of character. The first scenario is a very simple one. It's a 3x3 board. That's mostly what you're always playing on with this game. Simple layout. They've given you an example in the book, but I've just gone with something with a little bit more detail on the battlefield, just to provide some more cover and to show off a few different parts of the game. But it's very simple, very easy. You just have to have that small space. It doesn't require a huge layout, and even the terrain itself, you've got cardboard pieces that can represent the buildings. You don't need to do anything to get, to go all out with the scenery. Obviously, some people love to go all out with the scenery, and that's good. It immerses the experience a little bit. But the initial setup for the very first mission is that you've just got your two forces, which is a junior samurai and just some loyal followers. Happenstance meet another group, words of insult, etc. And then a matter of honor. They have to fight because, why not? It wouldn't be much of a game if we didn't have lots of fighting. So that's pretty much the basic premise. If you wanted to link this with something else, obviously you can. It's a great starting place. Get everybody used to the game, and we can begin it from there. Looking at a card, what we have here, from left to right, we have our aim, which is our attacking, striking. We have our evade, which is our ability to dodge. We have our strength, which is what we do for damage when it comes to melee weapons. We have our test of wits, which is to do with sometimes target selection. Sometimes it's to do with flipping over a token if you've got a specific mission that needs to be played. And you've got the test of honor, which is the diagonals. And then finally you've got the number of actions that the unit can take. So the actions also include when you need to dodge. So when you get attacked and you then have to make a dodge, that's when you have your options limited. On top of our standard deployment cards during the game, we also have some other cards that might come into play, which are some skills, cards of honor, cards of dishonor, and injuries. For our samurai hero, if they don't die of being wounded, then they can come out with an injury. You can choose to act dishonorably, where you get a card for your samurai to behave and act. When you act honorably, you get to draw one of these. And then during the game, skills are brought about. When you're running tournaments and points matches, the number of honor cards and dishonor cards you have also matter, and that's when they've got points values assigned. Basically you get so if you've got too many dishonor cards versus honor cards, and different samurai heroes, some of them actually start with a card already, and some of them may not, and they may have to gain them during the actual mission itself. Setting up for a battle, we have the cards, the deployment cards. We also have a set of community cards, the injury cards, honor cards, dishonor cards. And with the initial set, you have 24 skill cards, which you shuffle and split. I mean, they've all been shuffled, obviously, but they've all shuffled and split in half, so that 12 for each one of each side. So with the initial expansion set, you have these cards here, and those ones in the middle. And should you want to use this for the first scenario, you can obviously, but if you want to do it without any of the cards, then that too is okay. So we have our deployment cards. In this case they're very similar. We have the main samurai hero, we have a squad of experienced spearmen, and one side has 2 bowmen and the other side has 1 bowman and 1 musket, just for the benefit of showing how muskets work. As I said before, we have our dice and our tokens all put aside, and we have the Cup of Destiny. You can use a bag, but you want something where you're blind, where you're pulling out these tokens blind. And a place to roll the dice. And we've got some dice. These are the forces of the blues. And we can get started. Each card has a number of actions. So the Ashigaru each have 1 action. So there's 1 action token put aside for each of these, and the samurai has 3. Both forces are exactly the same. So what we're putting aside are 3 Ashigaru tokens, 3 samurai tokens apiece, and all of that just goes straight into here. On top of that are these 3 fate tokens. They also go in. When the third one of these is pulled, that's the end of the round, and that's all in there together. And we just draw out a token and go in terms of each player pulling out a token and activating. So the more astute of you might be thinking, wait a minute, what happens if I pull a token and I don't have a unit? Well, when you pull a token that you don't have a unit for and you can't assign to something that's available, that gets handed over to your opponent. So it's entirely possible for your opponent to have 2 goes back to back. Having chosen blues to go first, it's a samurai token. The units on foot move up to 6 inches, and that's what he has chosen to do. In this instance he's moving about there. And it's time for the green player to pull the next token. For the green player, a fate token. The fate token gets pulled aside just there, show that 1 has already been drawn, and they pull a card. This is usually kept from the opponent until they use it. You can only have as many cards as you have actions. So most samurai leaders, that's 3. You can only give these to the samurai heroes or their special companions. You can't provide them to the Ashigaru. So this one says that it's used once. The character can make a free move action. He must move towards the nearest objective by the shortest possible route, and has the knowledge keyword. That's important when we get into the more specifics, But basically this remains face down. He gets to use it once, which is a free move action to the nearest objective, which in this case is the opponent's. They have to, both samurais are facing off against each other. That's his, in effect, target. So he gets to make a free move action once. And we put that aside just there. You can only use these at the beginning of their activation. So this has been done, move on. Now it's time for the blues to pull their token. So the blues, oh hey, another samurai token. And makes a play to get some cover and to remain out of sight at this stage. So these barriers are 1 inch high, which means they're half the height of the model, and are considered an obstacle, which hinder shooting attacks. Anything that gets hindered, either charging or shooting, means that you're losing a die out of your available pool. And unless of course you're touching the actual base. So if you've got your archers lined up, and also if you have mounted units, there's special rules for them to jump over or to charge across some of this terrain. Anything that you've got that you're using as special terrain or something funky, then you and your compatriots should work out the rules as to what you're doing with that. So now we're back to the greens. Ashigaru. So the Ashigaru spearmen moving up. Now it's the blues. Ashigaru. What we're going to do with the targets here, we're going to give them a cautious move, which means they only move up 3 inches. But it also means that they still get to use their action if they get shot at, or if they get targeted by a bow or a musket. Alright, next. Another fate token. This samurai hero is getting himself geared up. Gets to do this once per turn. This is a duty. After this character cuts down a warrior, you can choose to take an honor card. Friends of the cut down warrior then gain a +1 dice on the test to keep their nerve, which is what we'll perhaps go through if we've got the right scenario when this comes up. Time for the blues. And it's an Ashigaru. A bow has a 24-inch range and a musket has a 20-inch range. And when we're lining up our targets, we use a line of sight to the model, being able to draw one part of the base of the target to the attacker. If we wanted to, this archer could fire at the Ashigaru spearmen, but we have 2 obstacles in the way that are considered hindering, and remove 2 dice to the attack for each obstacle. Well, 1 for each obstacle, totaling 2. A lone archer has 3 dice. Unless you wanted to take out a dishonor card, that's when you can add an extra dice on your attack by taking a dishonor card. But we're still looking at 2 dice. So in this instance, we're not going to shoot just because of that type of arrangement. But if the archer did decide to shoot, the Ashigaru spearmen, having used their action to move forward, do not have a token available for dodging, or have an action available for dodging, so they would just have to cop the hit if it was a successful strike. So instead, we're moving up 6 inches with the musketman. I'm calling that as close to touching the base of that as possible. He has the movement to do it. And from there, a 20-inch range will give the musketman a shot at anything that comes into view. From the line of sight rules, one part of the base has to be able to connect with a part of an opponent's base. Meaning, line of sight wise, these 2 units are well within line of sight, but not within range. Line of sight doesn't always guarantee that the shot is unhindered. If this was over the edge of a terrain piece, that would be considered hindered. Going over one of these is considered hindering. If a model was touching the corner of a building or touching the edges of terrain pieces, that is also considered hindered, and the loss of a die for each piece of hindering effects, basically. So we're about to head into the drawing of the token for the greens, and this is what's been pulled so far for the blues. And this is what's been pulled so far for the greens. So the greens have a few more tokens inside the Cup of Destiny, and there's 1 more fate token. The moment that the 3rd fate token is drawn, that's the end of the round, and then we get ready for the next round. So time for the greens to have their shot. And it's a samurai. He's choosing his once bonus action of a free move. And with his action, he's going to do another move forward. But he's going to actually keep it cautious. So we're doing 3 inches instead of the 6. Time for the blues. Ashigaru. The Ashigaru bowman is just within range of the enemy samurai, with nothing hindering that along the way. Getting to roll 3 dice on the attack. And because the samurai used a cautious move, gets to discard that to dodge rather than the normal token. Rolling 3 dice for the strike. Bows and muskets run with their own damage rolls rather than the strength rolls of the character, and they've got a few extra units to it as well. Because we're firing at something, or firing at the target over 12 inches, it'll be one less damaged roll, one less damage dice on the roll. Requiring 3 swords to actually roll for damage. Oh, to hit. We do not successfully fire off, achieving only 2. And as we mentioned before, if the number of crosses exceeds the number of swords, then that's a fumble or some other negative effect that comes into play. In this case, we just had that. 2 swords, 1 cross, and a blank. Not good enough. Because he didn't need to do an avoid roll, our samurai hero maintains the cautious marker. So now it's time for the green. Ashigaru. Needing to get into position because these guys are way too far and out of sight for anything effective. They need to make full moves. So we'll pick one and get them to do a full 6-inch move. Now it's time for the blues to pick one. Samurai token. Just moving to the edge of the building, the samurai warrior hunkers down. Now it's time for the greens to pick. And it's the end of the round. Being the third fate token, that is the end of the round. And now we gather all the tokens and reset what we can for round number 2. So after the first round, we've moved. We still maintain our cautious tokens. That only gets removed when we need to avoid an attack. And the greens only managed to have 1 action from their samurai, and 1 of their bowmen failed to move at all. And this is the strength of the system, in that you've got not only like a variable length of game rounds, but activations. You could have someone burn through activations before they're ready, or just end up having to hand over activations to their opponent. So now we're on to round 2. Alright, so we'll give it a shake. The blues go first. And they pull a samurai token. Charges can only happen within 6 inches, that's the standard move, and the 2 samurai are 9 inches apart. So our samurai chooses to move cautiously and setting himself up. Now it's greens. Ashigaru. It's possible to move 3 inches and still shoot, which is what this bowman is going to do. Line of sight to the enemy samurai is good. There is a corner in the way, so the shot will be hindered, and it's just slightly over halfway, meaning that the damage done will be 1 die less as well. So 2 on the attack and 2 on the damage should the attack succeed. If the attack succeeds, the samurai gets a free avoid because of the cautious token. Let's roll. And it's a fumble. When there's a fumble on the strike roll, the attacker rolls one of these, and on any successful sword, they take on a blood spot, which they do. A single blood drop means when damage is being done to the model or the group or the target, an extra damage die is added. You can sometimes have 2 blood drops, and you can keep gaining blood drops if they strike the wound but fail to actually cut you down or kill you, which can happen. So you can end up with 3, 4 or more blood drops. But the more blood drops you have, the more likely you are to be cut down the next time. We'll just place it here next to the guy. And it's Blue's turn. For an Ashigaru. So a 3-inch move, avoiding the obstacles. They get a clean shot against the spearman group, being able to use all 3 dice. And on the damage, because it's over 12 inches, they lose a die. Let's roll. For the bow shot. And we have 3 swords, which is a success. The fact that there's 1 X, it doesn't take away from the swords. But the 3 swords is all that's counted. It's just only if there are more X's than swords completely. So in this case, that was a hit. So now, once we've struck, the opponent must avoid. And because they don't have a cautious token, the action needs to be removed from the cup and placed on the unit. And now we roll an avoid for the Ashigaru group. Their avoid is 3. And 3 swords are a success. That is not a success. So they lose a model. They're now down from a group of 3 to a group of 2. Oh, sorry, let me clarify that. They didn't avoid, so now we actually get to roll the damage. 3 of these 3 swords is a success. We would normally have 3 dice for the bow. Over 12 inches takes 1 die away. 3 dice are a success. Any other result adds a blood spot and nothing else. Like that. The Ashigaru group receive 1 blood spot. While they didn't lose any men, they have a blood spot, meaning that the next time they get targeted for an attack on the damage roll, an extra die is added. Alright, so now it's time for the greens to pull something out. And remember, they've just lost an Ashigaru because of the avoid. And it's a samurai. Because we're doing an action, we lose the cautious token, and he's moving 6 inches to put him to engage, charge into the enemy samurai. And we must go as direct line of sight and direct lines as possible. and there's nobody in the way, we're good. A friendly samurai has 5 dice, needing 3 for a success, and a 5 allows it to be a special bonus. And we have no successful strike whatsoever. Now it's time for the blues. Samurai. He's going to attack. He loses his cautious token. He's now coming in with 5 dice. Getting 6 swords on the attack. So the attack with the 6 swords is a pass with excellence, pretty much. So that gives it a bonus in a moment. What it can do, it's called a deep cut, which just increases the amount of damage being done. However, the samurai that's been attacked now gets to avoid. So we pull out another token for the samurai hero, and it has 5 dice for the avoid, and 3 swords is a success. So what's happened here is that the samurai has passed with 5 swords, which means that it's not just an avoid, but they get a bit of a counter attack on top. With the quick drab, you roll 1 die, and if there's any sword result, then the opponent gains a blood spot, which it does. Now it's time for the greens to pull out from the cup of destiny, and it's a samurai token. The samurai token makes an attacking strike. And misses. The basic tally of tokens: the green armored samurai has used all 3 actions. The experienced spearman and one of the bowmen has also used their action. Over on the red side, 2 actions for the samurai hero and 1 for the bowman. So now it's time for the blue to pull out a token, and it's a fate token. Drawing a card. When pushing past a friendly warrior during a charge action, this character makes a test of strength. If passed, does not lose a dice from the strike roll, which is a hindered charge. So once per turn. So that remains face down, hidden from the opposing player until they plan on using it. Time for the green to pick. I pulled out 2 by accident. Ashigaru. The Ashigaru bowman moved 3 to take a shot at the musketman behind the wall with a hindered shot, meaning 1 less die out of the pool, and it's over 12 inches, so it'll be 1 less on the damage as well. If it's a successful strike, then the token needs to be taken out for the musketman in order for them to avoid. And nothing. Time for the blues, and it's a samurai token. We're in a scenario where the enemy samurai has no more actions left in order to defend themselves. So what our blue samurai is going to do is perform an act of honor, roll an attack using one less die, and they get to draw an honor card. Three swords are a success. There's no defensive rolls, and now it's time for the test of strength to cut the enemy warrior down. Which is a success with some degree of excellence. When they do this damage with the 5 or more, this is when they are able to cut the enemy down and then make an immediate move to the nearest enemy. But in this instance, what we will do first is, yes, the enemy is dead or cut down, but because it's a samurai hero, they're able to make a test of wits roll to stay in the battle, needing 3 swords, and does not happen. So in that case, the enemy is cut down, and the attacking the blue samurai is able to make a follow-up move. Performing a little bit of a what if, had the test of wits succeeded, this one, 5, then an injury card would have been placed on the samurai, and any effects would then be carried on for the rest of the battle. Ongoing for this battle, the character suffers -1 on the agility, but as we know, did not make the test of wits, so therefore cut down. When a samurai receives one of these, they cannot receive a second one. So if they get cut down again, they're just cut down. You're not able to actually have multiple injuries. It's pretty much you get done, test of wits, injury card. If you get attacked and goes through again, then you're a casualty. But as I said, in this case, it did not happen. Because the nearest enemy model is just out of range, there's no immediate charge to the character, but the model can make a free 6-inch move just like normal, which they do. And what we'll do is we'll move to the side. The blood spot remains, and they stay on for the duration of the battle. Now it's time for the greens to pull out a token. And it's an Ashigaru. This is one of those instances we were talking about before. The green player already has their Ashigaru already assigned and used, so this token goes and gets passed over to the other player. The musketman is taking a shot against the archer. Strike of 3, needing 3 swords, and missing. Because it's a musket, much like the bow, they have their own set damage, and there was nothing in the way and so on, so it was just put straight, dice rolling. In this instance it wasn't a success. Attached to the musketman now, we put a reload marker, and next round for their action, that's what they have to do, is to get rid of that reload marker. So now it's time for the blues. And it's a fate token. Drawing the fate. This is ongoing. When charging over a low barrier, or if a charge involves a climb or a leap, make a test of agility. If passed, the terrain does not hinder. And this is an agility check. And the other one was the strength. So they stay face down. Back to the greens. And it's an Ashigaru, which means that the green token being pulled has to be passed straight away to the blue player. They lose their cautious token and they make a full move to back up their Samurai Lord. What we forgot to do before, when the Samurai acted with honor, we get to draw an honor card. In this instance, your next warrior that makes a test of honor gains 1 dice. If a test for a loss of nerve, then all warriors testing for the same reason gain 1 dice. And then turn face down. So we're back to the blues, and it's the very last token, which is the end of round. Now we gather up all the tokens, put them back in the cup, and get ready for round 3. The state of play. We're down 1 Samurai Lord, which means those tokens do not go into the pool. Blood spots remain. Special conditions until they're discarded remain. And so on. So now we pull out the first token. The blues for the first one on round 3, Ashigaru. The Ashigaru Archer moving 3 inches to take a shot at the enemy. There is in the way, being hindered, but just the once, and that's 1 die loss on the strike. The enemy have a blood spot, so should it be a successful strike, there's +1 on the damage. Basically 2 attack dice, needing 3 swords, and we get 2. We do not succeed. The greens, Ashigaru. The Ashigaru Bowman making a shot against the Samurai Lord because it's the nearest target. If they were attempting to target the troops, which were 1 step further, then that's a test of wits because it's a further target than the most closest one. So the Samurai is the closest target, so that's the target being fired at. No hindering. We're going to roll 3 dice. It's over 12 inches, so that'll be 1 less dice on the damage roll. However, the blood spot adds 1, so it sort of negates that. On the attack, needing 3 swords, and we get it. So the Ashigaru, the Samurai, gets to avoid. Gets to avoid with 5 dice, but having to use up an action. Oops. And we need 3, which we have, yes we do. We got 4, so that's fine. So yes, the samurai avoids the bows, but sucks out an action in order to avoid. The blues, Ashigaru. Taking away the reload token, that's the action for our Ashigaru musketman. The greens, Ashigaru. The spearmen moved up 3 inches cautiously, giving them the cautious token so that they get that extra avoid should someone attack them. They are 7 inches away from the enemy unit now, so they can't come charging in, but it's just worth having that cautious token. We don't know what the next turn is going to show. Now it's time for the blues, and it's a fate. The maximum number of skills you can have per samurai is based on their actions. So in this instance, 3. Once per battle, before this character makes an action, 1 other warrior in your force can make a free action. There you go, that's very useful. That's a commander. Now it's time for the greens. Samurai token, of course they don't have a samurai, so it goes straight to the blues for their samurai to act. The samurai lord, or the armored samurai, taking his refuge underneath the watchtower, or whatever it is. Time for the greens, and it's a samurai. Basically we have line of sight, so that means they can be targeted, and there is part of the building structure in the way, so it becomes a hindered charge. Doing this once per battle for the free move for one of the units. Unless you're actually engaging in a charge, you're not allowed to get any closer than 1 inch to an enemy. And every time when you move through, your base needs to be able to fit through those zones. If people have to be pushed around or pushed to the side, especially when you're doing a charge, that's a hindered charge. And that's one of those instances where you need to do various checks sometimes in order to make things happen. Friendly units will just shuffle to the side. Opposing units become an obstacle. But yeah, so the samurai lord used this as the free move once per battle to get the samurai, to get the Ashigaru spearmen within 1 inch away from these guys, and we're good. And now the samurai lord makes his move. The samurai moved direct line, which meant there was a bit of a hindrance from between where he started to where the target is. Because it had nothing to do with a low barrier or a test of agility, then that's not relevant in this instance, and that's why that skill didn't need to be played. But does lose 1 die on the charge, giving him 4 for the attack versus the opponent. This is a bowman that has yet to actually move, so they will get an avoidance roll. The samurai is using all 4 of the dice and scores a nice hit to get a deep cut. Three dice for the avoidance roll, requiring 3 swords, and fails to accomplish. Now, cause the deep cut rule has been applied. If we fail to cut down the soldier, we get to apply additional blood spots. But with 5 strength, that's 5 dice, needing 3 swords, cutting down is likely. Likely, but not always. Look at that. Fails to cut the soldier down, the soldier automatically gains a blood spot, and then we add no more, just a single blood spot. For every sword, it would have been an additional blood spot. The greens, they get a fate token. They have no samurai for the skill, so there's no actual traits to be drawn out. We go straight to the blues and at the end of the turn. At the end of the gaming round, we have some activity. And we're good to go. Collect all the tokens, put them back in, and we can keep going. For the next new round, the blues draw out, and what have we got? Samurai. Samurai is fighting and has decided to do the honourable fight by rolling 4 dice instead of the 5. The samurai is fighting Yashigaru Bowman, which is enough to strike successfully. Yashigaru Bowman will take out an action token and gets to defend, needing 3 swords, and fails to do so. The bowman already has a blood spot, so that's the 5 strength plus the extra for the blood spot, so that's 6. Giving more than enough dice to be able to get a successful result. So from where the bowman was located, there is no one within 6 inches to be affected by it. Everyone else being just slightly either an inch or 2 inches out of that range. But that's where the test comes in, the test of nerve, in order to see if they fall back with a free move backwards. If you're within 6 inches of a fallen soldier, then you have to make a test, and you fall directly back away from the attacking model. So if they were closer, they'd be moving away from the samurai model, making a full move. It doesn't count as an action or anything. That's just a they don't have to keep falling back. It's not like a permanent route. It's just a test of nerve to fall back for that one spot, for that one instance. All right, next. So the greens, pulling out a token, and it's a samurai. The samurai is not within 6 inches of charging anything, but what it can do is avoid being shot at and retreat into a position of cover. So now it's blue's turn. Fate token. The samurai already has 3 skills and cannot have any more. So that's pretty much the first fate token. And now it goes to the greens. You pull out a Nashigaru. With a 3-inch move in position to take a shot on the bowman, it is still considered hindered because the bowman is in contact with the terrain piece. So that's still 1 die removed, and because it's over 12 inches, that'll be 1 die removed from any successful damage roll. Feeling a little bit dejected, we're going to draw a dishonor card to give ourselves 1 extra strike. So the normally 2, because of the hindered object, becomes a 3, and we're ready to roll. But we do draw a dishonor card for the green force. Probably a good thing we did. That's a strike. Taking out the action tokens for the Shigaru Bowman, they get to do an evade and successfully avoid being damaged. We get to draw a dishonor card because we added an extra dice on our attack, and it is okay. So basically it's still a dishonor card, but with no effect. Probably the best of the dishonor cards to get first, but for the most part they all have a particular effect which can be altering other parts to the game. And now we have 1 dishonor card here. We can move on. So now it's the blues. Ashigaru. So the Ashigaru spear group is moving to engage the other Ashigaru spear group, who get to use their cautious token for avoid. And because it's a full group, the full group attacking gets to use 4 dice. The defense is still 3 for these guys, and we'll go from there. Because it's a full group, and we didn't need to do that at all. Let's spend the cautious because we didn't get enough swords to make it a successful strike. What I had forgotten about previously, and it's something that I should have remembered, I suppose. Yeah, I should have remembered it. Whoever loses gets pushed back 1 inch. So the only other battles that where we had melee that might have made a difference, but probably didn't really, were just the between the samurai pulling back and forth. But anyway, whoever loses immediately moves back, and then we check for strikes, which is something that I had forgotten to apply with the previous melee combats. So now it's the green's turn. Pull out a fate. Now it's the blue's turn. And that's the end of the round. So we gather all the tokens and get ready for the next round. Blues go first. And the first thing pulled out, if I can grab one, a Shigaru. A barrier of 1 inch or less takes 1 inch off the movement, so the 6 inch move goes to 5, and that's what we're doing with this Ashigaru here. Greens, and it's a fate token. Blues, Ashigaru. This Ashigaru the bowman has line of sight to the enemy swordsman, but is hindered by their own people, and a catastrophic failure on the attack roll will strike at their own people. So we'll give that a shot anyway, because we want to use up that cautious token and get that done. So we're gone to 2 on the strike, needing 3 swords, and we're going to get 2, so no. So now it's time for the greens, Ashigaru. The green bowman has decided to continue his dishonourable ways. It's because it's normally 3 attacks, less 1 for the hindrance of the barrier, because that's what's next to the target bowman, plus 1. So we're striking, and we fail. And they get an extra dishonor card. And this one, once then turn face down. When the action is complete, everyone has to do a test of nerve to, everyone in your force has to do that, which they have to do. So the Ashigaru spearmen, who are the only other unit left, have to make a test of honor, 3 dice, and because they are experienced, they get an extra 1, and 3 of those, if they get 3 swords, they succeed. If they fail, then they have to make an immediate withdrawal of 6 inches. And they pass. Now it's time for the blues. It's another fate. And time for the greens. Ashigaru. The Ashigaru spear group, which is 3 plus the full group being 4, make their attack against the enemy Ashigaru spear group, and they just make it, but they make it. So now the Ashigaru spear group get to avoid 3 dice, and they have to use up one of their actions, and they don't. So now the spear group with a strength of 3 attack and fail to do any cutting down, so the enemy gain a blood spot. They're pushed back 1 inch and they gain a blood spot. So both forces now have a blood spot, and we're off to the next one. Now it's time for the blues. Samurai. Samurai moves 6 inches from in there to there. Now it's time for the greens. And they give it to the samurai, who charges in and makes for an attack. And doesn't do anything. Fumbles on the attack, which gives the enemy an opportunity to do another blood damage, which they do. Because it was a fumble, the enemy get to do almost like a counter strike. You roll the dice, and the samurai now has 2 blood spots. Having pushed back, 2 blood spots now exist on the samurai. One more, and it's the end of the round. Gather the tokens for the very last round, and we'll see where it goes from here. Alright, so the basic premise of this mission was to kill the samurai, but I just kept going in order to be able to highlight and go through different parts of the rule sets. But usually we would have finished a while ago. But I just wanted to keep this going, just so that way we can try and cover as many of the rules and some examples as possible. So the blues choose out first, and we do Ashigaru. So the Ashigaru squad moved into the enemy squad, and we are going to attack with the 4 dice because it's a full squad still. 3 swords, success. The enemy squad using their tokens to avoid, which they fail to do. At least it's not a slip up. And now in terms of the damage, the blues strike with an additional die for the blood spot, and it does 3 swords, which is enough to cut one of the models down. So now they're down to 2 on that base. Just take the 1 out of the base, and there are 2 left. So what we find out here is that if there are 3 left, they have 4 honor. If there's only 2 or 3 left, then they get the extra attack. The greens Ashigaru. They have their 1 bowman left, who's making that strike, but is not going to do a dishonorable check, just run it with the 2 dice for the hit and 2 dice for the damage. The attacker misses. Time for the blues. And it's a fate token. Greens. And it's a fate token. Back to the blues. Samurai. The samurai does the honourable thing, rolling 4 dice against the Ashigaru, who can't defend. And gets enough. Now for damage. And the Samurai Lord has lost his footing. Sorry, no, he's glanced it off. That's right, there's no damage on there whatsoever. So when you fumble on a damage roll, basically they don't take any additional blood. Oh, actually, I forgot to add. Oh no, there is no blood. So the because they were taken off as a casualty, there was no additional blood, so that was taken off. The fumble for a damage means that there's glancing and nothing happens, not even a blood spot. So no effect. After the to and fro of combat down this end, they were pushed back and forth and pushed to the side a little bit by the attacking samurai. So now it's green's turn. And it's the samurai. So the samurai is just going straight in for the normal 5 because we're having trouble rolling dice on this side. And we get it with 4, so we're lucky. That one's a blank. There's no avoidance. And we've cut through. So that removes another 1 off that base. So you might be thinking, okay, so this is a single guy on the base. Basically I can treat him like a single unit and take away the base, etc. No. You keep the base where it is because it needs to still move as if it's a full unit on that space. It takes up that much space. So the single units have to fit within that zone, and the ones on the plates have to fit in that zone. So even though they're down to the 1, you still need to keep it on the actual base for movement purposes. We will actually just finish it up there. I think I've covered enough of the basic rules to explain how most of it works. So what we started with today with the samurai, the spearman group, and then the 2 other single units, either 2 archers or the archer and the musketman, that works out to be 11 points. So for that initial starter combat, 11 points aside, that's what gets you a good grounding in how to play the game and how to move forward. We also looked at honor cards, and if we needed to use them, they were there, but this side didn't need to use them, and dishonor cards, which we played with as well. We didn't get an opportunity to play with the injury cards, but we saw how it worked, which leaves us okay in that regard. If you want to use the cards, you can use the cards. If you don't want to use the cards, then what you would do is just add a blood spot for the test of wits instead of an injury. But that's about it. So what does a normal game look like? This is roughly 24 points, roughly. So we're looking at the 2 squads of spearmen, and we've got a full squad of musketmen and archers. We have our samurai and an unarmored samurai. So one of them is the leader, the other one is the offsider. And then we have our bowman sergeant that has some additional benefits as well. So that's basically 24 points, which is a standard game. And when you're starting to get larger than that, it can become unwieldy, and this is when we're talking about in terms of the depth of the movement. Let's just hustle back for a sec. So basically a 24 point battle. We're looking at a few more units on the board, and they take up a little bit more space. So movement around, on, over. When you have combat and someone dies that's within 6 inches, then there's a test of nerve on falling back and so on. So it becomes a little bit more of a concern when you start to have a few more units on the board. So the smaller skirmish games on the 3 foot by 3 foot, pretty much this is what you wouldn't have much more than this. That's all. If you added more units, you could change it up, have some mounted combat and so on. What we will do next is just go over some of the pieces that we were looking at and expanding on them a little bit, introducing some of the rules, especially for the Sengoku period. Now that we've had an idea about what the cards look like, we can talk about how to use a few more things there. But that's coming up next. But that's the battle contingent done. I think we've sort of covered what we needed to cover on how combat ensues. All right. One thing we didn't discuss or didn't use this time around are quest cards. And these are cards that you take in secret. So you'll take one card, and this is something that you need to achieve for your hero. And they may be something like gain 3 honor cards, gain 3 dishonor cards. You fulfill that quest, you reveal the quest, and then you are able to pull a card off the top of your trait deck, your skills deck, and give it to your hero, even if they've already got 3 skills on that being already assigned. So they can add a little bit extra, and this is just a sample of some of the quest cards. but they're generally all roughly similar enough in the way that they work. Do actions, cards, cut down, be outnumbered, win so many battles in a row, like as in individual fights and so on. So you can do these things to just sort of provide some extra flavor to the game, which is very nice, and just another way of getting some of those skills given to your characters. The next step up are the Sengoku rules, which talks about more historical aspects of this period, and this is referring to the various wars and battles and changes of leadership across the various classes over the couple of hundred years, and gives you a brief understanding of the clan, some important dates in their history, as well as some game-based details. So what we have for the clans, if you choose to use the clans and the clan abilities, then 2 additional tokens are provided to each player, and these represent clan tokens. And you can use a clan token to gain specific abilities. But what we're looking at is each clan having generally 4 special abilities, and you pick 2 of them. You have to declare what they are beforehand. So at the beginning of the game, you would say that you're using the Yari drills, or you're using bold. And what that means is that when you spend a clan token for the rest of the turn, you can do certain things. Sometimes it's a clan token. I believe they're nearly all related. Yep. Some of them are for the rest of the turn, some of them are instantaneous, and there might even be a couple that are for the whole battle. But for the most part, you spend the token and then you get to do a thing. What we have here, and this is, every game's got their little bit of a head mess, and this is a little bit where you need to think about it a bit, where it says flip 1, 2, 3 on a card's face up, or 1, 2, 3 followers take a free 3-inch move, and so on. So that refers to this, which in turn refers to the skills. If we have a look at a skill that you get, they have a keyword. This one says mastery, and if you're playing the Honda clan, if you have these skills here, they are your favored skills. So they are the pieces that your clan prefers to use, and if you assign those types of skills to your samurai, then that's when you can get these additional benefits based on how many skills of those you have. Essentially, the 1, 2, 3 means how many favored skills you have. So obviously, most battles you start with 0, but if your warrior already starts with 1, then you start with 1. And as you gain them, you have these values where it says 1, 2, and 3. So on the instance where 1, 2, or 3 followers make a free move, if you've got 1 or 2 of these skills, and we're flipping and turning, then that relates to 2. So that means 2 units can make a free 3-inch move. And if you have 3 skills, then 3. The good thing with using some of this Sengoku period pieces, you have other units that are outside of just the standard samurai clans. You have peasant armies, Ronin and bandits, separating the Ronin from the bandits, as well as a ninja clan, shinobi clan. And they also have a few more scenarios to use and to draw from in order to play a more complete campaign. Remembering that this is really a good game at almost that smallish skirmish level. Once you get to a certain size, it becomes a little bit more difficult to manage and to put across the board, and it can take a lot longer to play a game. You might also need to use a larger board and more terrain, etc. So there are other offsets. On a 3x3, that 24 points is great for whatever we would normally see in our favorite samurai-based or period-based movie or TV show, which, by the way, includes the Shogun show. If you haven't seen that, that's got lots of great examples of how this sort of game can work, because it's a lot more skirmish action between lords that are supposedly at peace, but things happen along the way. So here's an example of one of the expansion cards. This is our Renegade boss. And you'll see that he's got a little symbol there, which goes with his skills, which are these ones here. So as he can also include those skills into his deck, which are more personalized to himself. And pretty much he's one of the renegade types, so you could easily set them up as another faction, use one of the other rules and so on. But and he'll have his own people, renegade bowmen, and so on. So that's just an example of how the expansions just slot through. They generally come with all of their own little cards and everything else as well. See that he's pretty tough. He's got 6 on his strength, 5 on his attacks, 4 on his agility, and so on. So he's a bit of a beast. Might be fun to play. Might be fun to get him out there and bash a few heads. Some of their quests are specifically going after the ruling classes and so on, and so on. So there are different ways, again, by choosing a different group or a different army, that you can expand the game and you can just open it up a little bit more, which is fantastic. And so all of these are obviously available through the Grey for Now Games website and all on through their store, which will have all the details up in both the description and along the way through this this little cast. But it's all pretty cool. Graham Davies done an amazing job in keeping this game going and progressing it forward in its natural course. You've got a few more historical options from when Warlord Games took over. Warlord Games, when they had it originally, it was, I suppose you could call it, mildly generic. You didn't have much in the way of historic figures or historic context, but as the game's developed, they've pulled a few more pieces out of history. You've got a few other options for characters to select as leaders of your army, as well as to introduce into as allies and so on. But the game really holds itself well, and if you've got the original version of Test of Honor, you're not going to notice a difference between this and the current version, which, as I mentioned before, is quite surprising when you see how other game companies progress their games forward. A couple of card artwork differences. Maybe a few names have become a bit more generic from what they were previously, but aside from that, you're looking at Test of Honor moving into a little bit more of an historical value. What I know personally, I would love a Shintaro and Tombe, but you can make them. That's just as easy as to make them through the various characters that you have on option, with the unarmored samurais and the ninja leaders and so on. You can do what you need to do. So this has been quite an in-depth view of Test of Honor, and I hope that everyone is quite happy with what they've seen and how I've tried to highlight the gameplay, which is a little bit more than talking just blandly about the rules. Seeing something in action can sometimes cement a few of those twitchy things you read and you go, I don't quite get it. But you see it in action and you go, oh, okay, that's how we do that. Of course, there will always be mistakes made and declarations claimed with confidence that are wrong, but hopefully I've kept that to a minimum, and I've corrected myself a couple of times when I saw that might have been happening. But the game itself is available through Grey for Now Games, and like I said, I'll put the details up and we'll be able to hopefully keep this game alive and have a look and see what the other offerings are for Grey for Now. That if you've liked the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Combat or Department of Ungentlemanly Warfare or the new movie that's out, there's also an O200 game that's linked to that sort of behavior. Anyway, well, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, Patreon, all those things. You know the drills. I'll keep everything in the details, which probably people don't read, but that's fine. And we'll get it moving from here. All right, well, thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's patience and look forward to getting some more games of all sorts on the board for everyone to look at. Have a good one.